welcome to Black Crow Gaming. My name is Arron, and this is the Adeptus Custodes Tactica. And this week we're going to be looking again at the Adeptus Custodes meta as it changes, and I'm going to be reviewing the Hemel Hempstead International Team Tournament. And obviously, I'm really excited to talk to you about that. It was a great weekend. If you've never been to a team event, it consisted of 5 players on each team. So you were just playing Warhammer with your mates in like a long row, and we had a great weekend. So before we get into it, I need to ask you to do a few things for me. If you like this content and you want to see more, please just give us a like, drop us a subscribe, and hit that bell notification. All of that really helps us grow as a channel, and we really appreciate it going forward. We also have 2 amazing sponsors, and our first sponsor I'm going to talk about this evening or today is Glasshammer Gaming. Glasshammer, they are a online presence as well as a on tabletop presence, and they also have a physical store, and they sell all of your toys that you could want when it comes to Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer paints, Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering, all of those sort of gaming goods. And if you go onto their online store and you put in Black Crow, you get an additional 5% off their online retail cost, which is already at 15 to 20%. So you can get yourself up to 25% or 20%, which isn't bad. And I think it's absolutely worth going for. Our other sponsor is Terrain Forge. They're the wonderful individual who does all of our terrain for our battle reports. And if you're interested in seeing what that looks like, go on to our battle reports and you'll see Josh and Simon playing it weekly. To be able to get that, you just need to go onto their website, and if you put BCG5, you get an additional 5% off there as well. And I'm excited to say that potentially we have a new sponsor coming, and we will be showing that off in the near future. But let's have a talk about what I want to talk to you about this week, and that is Adeptus Custodes Tactica. I've done it again, folks. Left it open. So, as you can see, this week we're going to be talking about the Tournament Custodes Meta Review Hemel Hempstead. And for me to be able to talk about this, I am going to have to turn off my camera so that we can get the full experience. So, I'll see you shortly, folks. So what we are planning on doing is we're going to talk about the Hemel Hempstead, and I'm going to go through all 5 of my games. My Adeptus Custodes list at the weekend went 4-1, and I took the Shield Toast, and I talked about this in last week's video, what I was taking. And I took 2 Blade Champions with the Warlord having the Panoptis specs, which gives you ignore cover. 1 unit of 4 Guardians with 1 with a short shield and sword, and I do that deliberately. And the reason I do that is because I like that 1 guy being able to tank 2 free damage weapons. In the meta at the minute, there's an awful lot of free damage, and having that 1 guy that takes 2 out of the potential shots going into your unit is very useful. I then take 2 units of 4 Wardens, which are used with those Blade Champions, and that each unit has a Vexilla. I have a unit of 2 Virtus Praetors. Yes, everybody's been telling you on the internet that Virtus Praetors are still bad, but I use Virtus Praetors as a tech piece, and over this weekend they scored me an awful lot of points, and I'm going to show you in the next few slides how they were effective. I used 2 units of 3 Venatari with spears, 2 units of 4 Witch Seekers, 2 Caladius tanks with Blaze Cannon, 1 Draxus, 1 Calidus. And that went 4-1 this weekend. And we are going to have a look at what I went into. So round 1 didn't quite go to plan, as you can see there from my scoring. I went into Mike from Didcot Wargaming, and if you look up Didcot Wargaming, they also do tournaments. So big shout out to Mike and the Didcot guys. They're over towards Oxford Way, and they are doing beautiful UKTC events. So the round 1 was Terraform and Swift Action, and we paired into each other. Now, neither myself nor Mike really knew how this was going to go, and as you can see from my turn 1, I didn't draw the best cards. I drew Established Locus and Overwhelming Force, and Mike fortunately drew Overwhelming Force and no prisoners. Now, again, unfortunately, I went first in this round, which wasn't fantastic. So you can see from the blue arrows where I kind of positioned myself. So the first blue arrow to the far left, I used my Virtus Praetors to move up to that angle along with my sisters. Now, the reason that was is because I could hold that quite safely, and the Virtus Praetors were there to kind of whip round and potentially do some damage. Actually, I lied to you. My sisters weren't there. It was just my Virtus Praetors. In the middle, I staged the bulk of my force, and you can see where that red area I've highlighted there, that is where a lot of the action happened. The bottom right, where that other arrow is just showing where I put one of my grav tanks. And the reason I put my grav tanks there, because I want to be able to threat this objective, and I want to be able to threat the middle. And I positioned in that far right lower L some sisters just so that they could help me get containment if it come up, of which you can see in the latter rounds it did, and it scores me 6 points. Now this looks like actually I was completely dominated. To an extent, I was from at turn 3. So what basically happened was, this was the big turning point. It was that position where I was about to do something big, which was going to cause some big issues. And I went into the Master of Executioner. And I kind of felt that, okay, it was just a Master of Executioner left. One guy should be able to clear this up. So with crit 5/6s, anyway, it didn't go that way. The Mo stayed alive with a wound, and he in return killed 4 Wardens, which basically flipped the game on its head, because at that stage, and I think, Mike, if you watch this, you'll agree with me that if I took that central point, that was going to be mine for a while. If I didn't take that central point, which at this stage I should have done, it was Mike's game. So it was a really important swing, and I got rather unlucky that the Mo survived, but this is dice. In the end, we had an amazing game. Mike is a fantastic opponent. He was excellent to play against. And although I felt I positioned myself in the correct places and I was dealing with it well, when that happened with the Master of Executioner and I lost that unit, that was a big error on my front, and I shouldn't have allowed that to happen. I should have positioned myself in a way that I was probably equally putting 2 into the Master of Executioner, and there was another exalted 8-bound left at the point. I should have put just 2 into him. So I ended up not using my Blade Champion at all because I incorrectly selected my targets. So round 1 was a big learning curve for me. I sat there and I had to kind of really reassess, be like, I need to focus here. That was a silly mistake, and I cost the game there, and potentially even cost my team the round, as we lost that round. Going into round 2, it started to look a bit better for me in the way that I was playing. I went into a lovely gentleman called Doug, who is from London, and he brought this beautiful Hypercrypt army, painted beautifully, with the Silent King, with a monolith, some other chaff. And that was one hell of a game. So as you can see from point scoring wise, I scored quite high because it was on Purge the Foe and I was going second into Necrons, which are particularly quite flimsy. That was really difficult for them. Now, as you can see in the top left corner there, where I've highlighted red, I highlighted that simply because I was able to move my Virtus Praetors onto there, and they essentially held that objective the whole game. Doug played rather passively because he had been coached to do so, and as we talked about it at the end of the game, maybe that wasn't the right strategy. He definitely, being Hypercrypt, had the tools to really bully me off these objectives. So that red area there is where the Virtus Praetors just sat and they held. And Virtus Praetors are amazing at that because they can hide in this small L, and then they can just literally whip around onto that objective. And they're very tough to kill, and your opponent can't necessarily deal with that really easily. Now, in Purge the Foe, if you don't know what that is that it's hold 1, hold more, kill 1, kill more. And as you can see from here, I was able to really score big on my primary with scoring a 48 overall. And I also did well on my secondaries. So as you can see, that blue line from the middle, that moves naturally into that middle objective. And I positioned myself so that I had an awful lot that could just sit there. And then I brought my Venatari down. So The Venatari I used to tag the monolith and get onto his home objective, so he had to deal with it. Doug very cleverly brought some stuff, brought a unit, 3 units actually, to that top left area, and I, with my rapid ingress threat, was able to then counterplay that with my Venatari, charge them. I had my Draxus unit in that medium L in the middle, and I was able to pull them out and shoot them to bits. That was very useful. That ended up killing off 3 units, which he was using for scoring, and they were just gone. Now, I've highlighted in this bottom right-hand corner here, this in black. Now, this is where Doug kept the concentration of his forces, but for some reason he wasn't taking this objective here, which is what he really should have done, because then ultimately he could have used his other units to try and bully me off these other objectives. Now, as a Custode player, my game plan going into this was just to hold 3. I focused on 3. I wanted to make sure that if he took me off 1, I always had 2. And that was my plan. And you can see this kind of triangle of where I'm kind of going. And I did that deliberately, and it worked out really well. So I took the win in that one, 14-6. Doug was an amazing opponent, lovely to talk to, and he had some pretty bad dice towards the end, but I don't think that would have really changed things with how the score was going. And we had a really good chat afterwards, and I wish his team all the best in the future, and I hope to see him again at another team event. Going into round 3, I went into Tom and his Space Marines. Now, his Space Marines into list was really interesting. He kind of took a bit of everything, and actually it was really effective at just being able to kind of deal with most things. He had the double Redemptor, Vindicator, a Gladiator. He had Rebute Guilliman on there. He had Calgar, and then, scoring units. Now, the areas I've highlighted in red is where basically the action happened. Now, Doug set himself up to have a Redemptor and a Gladiator go to this far left objective. Now, this was only taken hold in hidden supply, so essentially 6 objectives, hold as much as you can. So Doug rolled in advance for his Dreadnought, didn't quite get enough, and was unable to sit on that objective on the far left. My Virtus Praetors, obviously being as fast as they are, moved 18 inches around, landed on there and kept it. Now, I was able to tactically hide those Virtus Praetors from that Dreadnought for an awful long time, which meant that the Dreadnought didn't really achieve much up in that top left-hand corner. Next thing that happened was he used his other Dreadnought, which was positioned in this sort of like middle red area, to push to then threat to where the red area in my deployment is. He didn't come into my area with that Redemptor, but I was able to counter charge, and I got my Wardens in, which actually ended up killing that Redemptor, which was very lucky. And there were points in the game here where momentum was shifting. Calgar and Rebute Guilliman came over, and they actually got all the way over into my deployment, but I was able to kind of deal with them quite efficiently, and I was using my rapid ingress to then steal me objectives that he wasn't on, which was pushing my primary score quite high. In the bottom right hand corner here, he used some scouts to sit on that objective. Now, I pushed forward with my Witch Seekers to there, and then I also used some Venatari to drop in there to steal this objective off of him and make it securely mine, because there was a Vindicator popped in his deployment to the right hand side of that medium L, facing that objective down in the bottom right. However, because you're able to hold that objective from behind the wall, I was able to kill the unit with my Venatari, and my sisters were then able to sit in there and live on that objective. Now, he did bring some jump pack intercessors over, but they failed to kill off the sisters unit, and then the Venatari were able to counterplay, come in and kill that unit. So unfortunately, the Vindicator was kind of in a little bit of no man's in that area and didn't really achieve very much. Now, my Caladius grav tanks were doing the work. They were shooting into units. They were causing damage. He did very well using the terrain to avoid them, and I equally did the same thing. So in the end, it ended up with a 12-8 to myself, and I scored 93 points to his 81. It was a very good game. Tom was a fantastic opponent. This is round 3 of day 1, so we're both absolutely exhausted at this stage. But I was able to get the win again. So day 2, and we pair into a team who are called the Warhamsters. Really nice guy. They describe themselves as like the beer and Warhammer kind of players, but they're obviously very good players. And they took some really skew lists. And I went into Matt's Orks Dreadmob. Now, the reason I've drawn all over this map is because we actually went on to the light board. I was an attacker. I attacked his Orks, and then he chose to go light board. And I was really worried about this because this was a shooty Orks army. And so those blue lines that I've drawn on there, they are to represent how the scenery actually was positioned, because I couldn't find the map for the light board. So in turn 1, Matt got very unlucky with his draw and didn't really draw of anything. He went first, and he put me in Gretchen jail with a character that was sat on that objective. So you can see I got marked for death. I discarded it, and I ended up in round 1 pulling Storm, Hostile, Objective, and Assassinate. That was the perfect first turn for me. So I sent in my Warden and Blade Champ, and they managed to get the charge into those Gretchen, and they killed them to the exact, moved on to the point, and held. I then used my Virtus Praetors on this far right to run off towards this other objective. But because I was scared that the Gretchen were going to live, because there were 20 of them, I was worried that I wouldn't get enough attacks into them as well as killed character. I did put a Virtus Praetor, because one had been killed, into that objective. Now, I learned really quickly that this dread mob was scary. I'd put my Caladius pointing towards that bottom right hand objective, because obviously it's the light board, and I was like, I can just fret that the whole game with this tank. And he popped out his looters with a character, and they took that tank down to 2 wounds, and that's when I really realised that, oh, wait a minute, these looters slap. Like, they tell you they hit on 6s, but actually with the sustained or lethals that they can get, they really do pack a punch, and they get like re-rolls and so on. This gentleman took 30 looters, killer cans, did junk pack, storm boys. There was a lot of guy, like 60 Gretchen. There was a lot for me to chew through. So I highlighted the areas that I kind of focused on. I ignored that top left objective, because I didn't feel the need to. Custodians just don't have the units to go after everything. So you have to kind of pick your battles. Picking the center for Custodians is good, because most people, especially on Search and Destroy, because most people will stage in the center as well. So you can ping those Wardens out. So my first unit of Wardens actually ended up tanking an awful lot of shooting from the looters, leaving a Blade Champion alive. He then had to bring out some more Gretchen to try and roadblock me. And this was kind of just slowing me down rather than stopping me scoring. I was still scoring points. I was getting points, as you can see, consistently. And I scored. I actually ended up scoring max on my secondary game. And in the end, I ended up scoring quite well, because it's Burden of Trust. You have to guard stuff, and I was basically just sitting there on objectives. Guarding the objectives is not an action, so you can kind of still do stuff whilst on that objective. And the hot spots basically were these red circles. As you can see on that, I used these arrows here on the bottom right here. I moved onto that objective, and then used I used to push into his deployment zone, because I got in the very last, I got like behind. I got Bring It Down. I got behind enemy lines at one point. I got all of these awesome cards, which I was able to score really, really well. Because I'd already pretty much got rid of all of the threat as well. By turn 5, I drew Recover Assets, which was at the perfect time when I had a lot of assets left. So I was able to do that in each area, gaining me a big 6, which I never normally can achieve. So and Bring It Down, there's a lot of vehicles in this list. So I was able to kill quite a lot in that battle round 4. Matt was another fantastic opponent. Neither of us knew how it was going to go. I think picking the light board for him was actually just as much a disadvantage, because just my general shooting was just killing orcs in themselves, and also his own orcs killed themselves because all of their weapons were hazardous. It was a fantastic round 4. What a start to the day, and an amazing opponent, and I really hope I get to play them again. So round 5, the last one, I'm 3-1, and I took one for the team, and I get paired into Astra Militarum with the Aquilons, with another jump down unit, which Scions, tanks, Rogal Dawn, all the stuff you expect to see in an Astra Militarum list. And it was Scorched Earth and Inspired Leadership. Now, again, we went onto the heavy map, and I've changed the scenery just to represent that. So, where did the action happen? So, again, I focused on 3 points. I used my Virtus Praetors to move over onto that point and to hold. I then used, I had my tanks positioned in a way so that they could see into the middle and see towards that objective I really want to hold. So I positioned one tank, and where that medium L is, I literally put it right at the bottom there, and I positioned another Caladius Grav tank where that bottom blue arrow sits. That's where that tank was sitting, and then the bulk of my force was in the middle, because on the heavy board you could actually hold the center with within that area terrain. This was an extremely close game, folks. Like, I had very little left, and I'm not ashamed to say that in my last round I had next to nothing, but I was able to just hide. Now, Chris was quite aggressive. He was moving things forward at me, throwing the Aquilons in my backfield, and you can see where that red circle is in my area. That's basically where the Aquilons were just dropping, trying to take me off my home objective. And I was very fortunate to say that I lived and was still able to score big on primary. Very tough opponent, very tough game, and he was just an absolute gent to play. We were both exhausted by the end of it, kind of mentally starting to come to an end. Chris's team actually won that overall, but I was able to beat the Astra Militarum, as you can see from scoring. He actually performed pretty good when it came to his secondaries. He did pretty good when it came to primary, but I was just able to deny him at key points, which was really useful. When it came down to this game, what it came down to is that the Astra Militarum are easily the best, probably one of the best armies in the game at the minute. Their damage output is obscene, and it was something that I was really struggling with. They were just deleting my units, and I wasn't really able to do much about that. I think the board helped me quite a lot, and I imagine Chris would probably agree. And what a way to end the tournament. I finished 4-1, which I was really happy to do, especially with Custodes not being the best in the meta at the minute. And overall, my general take home of that event is that, you can tailor what you go into with teams. But as you can see, I played 5 very different armies, some of which are, in really good positions in the meta, and was able to achieve that. And it made me quite reassured. I wasn't the only 4-1 Custode player there, though. Although there was 8 of us for the weekend, I wasn't the only one. And Charles E. from his Adeptus Custodes list also went 4-1. Now I'm going to bring my beautiful face back now for everyone to see, as we've talked about the rounds. He took a Talons list, Talons of the Emperor, and he took 2 Blade Champions, a Guardian with sword and shield, Guardians with all spears, 2 Rhinos, 2 times 2 a large Custodian, only 1 tank, 1 5-man Custodian Warden with Vexilla, 2 times 4 Witch Seekers, Caladius and Draxus. Now I imagine he was using those Witch Seekers to go in the Rhino, push forward, and they just live longer and sit on objectives. And then he was using his other stuff to move around and do things. And obviously they have the reactive move. I actually like that list. I think it's a good list. I'm a little unsure about one Cladius Grav tank. I think it's probably just there to be a threat rather than actually be efficient. Because in my game, my Cladius Grav tanks were amazing. They were killing 8-bound in my first turn. They were blowing up tanks. They were just excellent. And I do wonder what the utility of one tank has. But obviously, Charles piloted his Adeptus Custodes really well and was able to go 4-1 for the weekend. So a massive well done to him. So that's kind of the end of the my episode, folks. I just want to say thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, I have got some form of chest infection, so hence I might sound a little croaky, but I'm still trying to get better. But I didn't want to miss out on being able to give you guys this review. I had a great weekend, and I cannot wait for the next teams in February. And thank you all for listening.